I'm 27F, and my older sister, Claire 30F, has made my life a competition I never signed up for. 3 years ago, she married Eric 35M, a man with serious money, and ever since, she's treated me like I'm beneath her. My parents act like she's the golden child, and I'm just the one who didn't secure a future the smart way. I have a stable job. It's nothing glamorous, but I pay my bills, live comfortably, and I'm working toward bigger things. But to Claire, that means I'm wasting my life. She loves to remind me that while I'm working hard, she's living in luxury, shopping at designer stores, vacationing in Europe, and driving a car that costs more than my yearly salary. At first, I ignored it. If that's what makes her happy, good for her. But the comments kept coming. She'd visit my apartment and make exaggerated faces as if she had stepped into a shack. "You really should think about upgrading," she'd say, glancing at my furniture like it was some charity donation. If I bought a new outfit, she'd smirk and ask if it was fast fashion or if I finally decided to treat myself. If I mentioned a good month at work, she'd sigh dramatically. "I don't know why you bother. You could just find a rich guy and actually enjoy life." The worst part? My parents ate it up. They acted like Claire was proof that she had made all the right choices and that I was the family disappointment for actually working for my money. Family gatherings became a nightmare. Claire would show up wearing something ridiculously expensive, casually dropping comments about her latest shopping spree in Paris. If I contributed something to a meal, she'd joke about how she forgot what budget food tastes like. And Eric? He was polite, but always distant. He didn't participate in Claire's comments, but he also didn't stop them. I started suspecting that maybe she wasn't as high up in his world as she pretended to be. Then came the breaking point. We had a family dinner at my parents' house. Everyone was bringing something, and I decided to make one of my best dishes, a homemade meal I'd spent hours preparing. Claire arrived last, and the moment she saw my dish, she burst out laughing. "Oh wow," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You really still cook your own food? You know, normal people just cater from somewhere decent." My parents laughed. They actually laughed, like I had done something embarrassing. Something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to defend myself. I was done trying to prove anything with words. Instead, I smiled, sat down, and made a decision right there. Claire thought she was winning at life because she had married into money. Fine. But I was going to show her that success isn't about who you attach yourself to. It's about what you build for yourself. And I was going to do it quietly. That night, while Claire showed off pictures of her latest vacation, I stayed silent. But when I got home, I started making real plans. I had already been playing with the idea of starting a side hustle, something flexible that I could do while keeping my main job. Now, I was ready to go all in. I started researching investment options, freelancing, and potential passive income streams. I kept it all to myself. No need to invite negativity into my plans. A few weeks later, I landed my first freelance contract. The pay? More than I made in 2 weeks at my job. Claire had no idea. Neither did my parents. And that was the best part. Because while they were laughing at me, I was already setting the foundation for something bigger. After that dinner, I stopped wasting energy on Claire and my parents' approval. They wanted to treat me like the family failure? Fine. I had better things to focus on. I still kept my day job, but I started putting in serious time into my side hustles. Late nights, early mornings, I treated it like a second job. The freelance contract I had landed turned into steady work, and soon I was making more from it than I expected. Instead of spending, I saved. Every extra dollar went into investments, growing slowly but surely. My friends noticed the change first. They saw me working nonstop, passing on nights out, staying glued to my laptop. When I finally told them what I was up to, they were all in. They supported me, sent me job leads, connected me with potential clients. Some even started their own side gigs, inspired by how quickly things were taking off for me. My parents? Different story. Every time they called, they had the same question. Had I met someone yet? According to them, I was working too hard for too little. In their eyes, Claire had life figured out, marrying rich, living effortlessly. Meanwhile, I was struggling for no reason. Claire eventually heard about my side hustles. I didn't tell her. My parents must have mentioned it, probably in a "can you believe she's still doing this?" way. At the next family gathering, she wasted no time bringing it up. She smirked, tilting her glass of wine. "So, you're still playing around with that little hobby?" I didn't respond, which only made her more eager to talk. She went on about how exhausting it must be to work so much when I could just find someone and relax for once. Then came the usual lecture about how I should aim higher in life, which in her world meant marrying into money instead of making my own. I let her talk. Meanwhile, my income streams kept growing. Freelancing wasn't an overnight success. At first, I took on small, underpaid gigs just to build my portfolio. Consulting work started slow, with clients trickling in through word of mouth. And investing? It wasn't a straight shot. Some stocks dipped, and one rental deal fell through. But I kept at it, adjusting, learning. Eventually, my side hustles weren't just side hustles anymore. They were my real income stream. The downside: I was stretched thin. Juggling a full-time job and side hustles wasn't easy. There were nights I barely got any sleep, weekends that disappeared into work. But the results kept me going. Claire, on the other hand, kept flaunting her luxury lifestyle. Designer bags, high-end restaurants, 5-star vacations. Every time she posted something, my parents practically applauded. At a Sunday dinner, she bragged about spending an embarrassing amount on a shopping spree in Milan. My mom gasped in admiration. My dad laughed like she had just won a gold medal. I sat quietly, eating my food, not saying a word. I had reached a financial milestone that week, enough savings to consider buying property. But I wasn't about to share that, not with them. The first sign of cracks in Claire's world appeared a few weeks later. She had been planning another big trip, this time to Dubai. But suddenly she canceled, no explanation, just a vague excuse. Then a family friend casually mentioned something odd. Claire and Eric had been arguing a lot lately, and not the usual bickering, full-blown fights. Claire's attitude toward me shifted too. The jabs became sharper, more frequent. If I wore something nice, she'd scoff that it was affordable luxury. If I drove somewhere instead of taking an Uber, she'd sigh like I was hopeless. One day, while scrolling online, I saw something interesting. Eric had posted photos from a business trip. Claire wasn't in them. She always tagged along on those trips. Something was definitely off. At another family event, the tension boiled over. Claire was in rare form that night, taking digs at me every chance she got. She called me cheap for not upgrading my apartment, joked that I'd never live like her at this rate. I set down my drink and finally spoke up. It's funny how obsessed you are with my finances when I actually have control over them. The room went silent. Eric, who had been quiet all evening, suddenly let out a short laugh. Then, still looking at his drink, he muttered, "Nothing wrong with financial independence." Claire's face went stiff. She quickly changed the subject, but the mood had shifted. For the rest of the night, she was quieter, tenser, and I couldn't help but notice Eric never stood beside her when she spoke. A week later, that same family friend dropped another hint. Claire's marriage? Not as perfect as she made it seem? I finally did it. After months of grinding, saving, and working every spare moment, I bought my first rental property. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest apartment in a decent neighborhood, but it was mine. No co-signers, no handouts, just my own hard work paying off. I kept it quiet. No announcements, no Instagram posts. I wasn't doing this for validation. But small changes started happening and people noticed. I upgraded a few things, nothing flashy, just subtle improvements. A better laptop, a slightly newer car, treating friends to dinner without checking my bank account first. It didn't take long before Claire caught on. At the next family dinner, her eyes immediately scanned me. She always did that, sizing me up like I was some kind of personal project. Her first jab came quick. She commented on my budget watch, even though she'd never cared about my accessories before. Then she moved on to my car, scoffing that it was basic compared to Eric's. I didn't argue. Didn't react. That only made her double down. Meanwhile, Eric was different. He wasn't playing along like he used to. In fact, he barely acknowledged Claire's comments at all. If anything, he seemed irritated. Then came the real shift, my parents. At first, my parents still fawned over Claire, but cracks started forming. When she made a backhanded comment about my car, my dad hesitated before laughing along. And when I casually mentioned a recent business success, my mom's eyes flickered with something. Was it curiosity? Maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to realize I wasn't the failure they had painted me to be. My mom, usually the first to brush me off, actually asked about my work. Claire's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. A few weeks later, the cracks in her perfect life became impossible to ignore. It started with something small, Claire casually mentioning that Eric had been annoying about money lately. She tried to laugh it off, but there was an edge to it. Then came the canceled trips. First, it was Dubai, then Paris. Trips that Claire would usually flaunt all over social media just weren't happening. Instead, she was around more, hanging out at our parents' house more. And for someone who supposedly had an endless flow of wealth, she sure seemed fixated on what I was doing. One night, I took a weekend trip to a nice hotel. Nothing extravagant, just a little getaway for myself. I didn't post about it, but when my mom casually mentioned it in passing, Claire's reaction was instant. She wanted details. Where I stayed, how much I paid, what I did. Then, almost immediately, she started talking about some luxury resort she and Eric were planning to visit soon. But she never went. The next time I saw Eric, he looked different, more tired, less interested in entertaining Claire's usual antics. And when she made yet another comment about how I'd never live like her, he actually raised an eyebrow. I mean, at least she's got her own money. Claire's head snapped toward him so fast, I thought she'd get whiplash. I let the moment pass, but I filed it away. Eric was changing, and not in a way that worked in Claire's favor. Then came the breaking point. Another family gathering. Everything was normal at first. Claire, as usual, was dressed to impress, talking about designer brands and making subtle digs at my simple lifestyle. Then out of nowhere, she snapped. She turned to me and accused me of being obsessed with competing with her. Said I was trying too hard to prove something, as if my entire existence revolved around making her look bad. I just looked at her and asked one question. If your life is perfect, why does my success bother you so much? Silence. Claire's jaw tightened. My parents shifted uncomfortably, but the real surprise came from Eric. Completely unfazed, he took a sip of his drink, and without looking up, dropped a casual bombshell. Eric had been quiet all evening, but when Claire bragged about her latest purchase, he tensed. You know, Claire, you burn through money like it's nothing, he muttered, shaking his head. Maybe it's time I stopped financing your little shopping addiction. Claire's smile stiffened, but she waved him off. A week later, the credit cards were gone. The room froze. Claire's face went pale. My parents looked at her, then at Eric, then back at her. For the first time in years, they weren't defending her. She stormed out after that. No dramatic speeches, no clever comebacks, just pure humiliation. And for the first time ever, I didn't feel like the family failure. I felt like the one who had won. After that night, word spread fast. Claire, the untouchable, the golden child, the one who married well, wasn't as financially secure as everyone thought. At first, it was just whispers. A canceled trip here, a sudden budget-friendly restaurant choice there. The same family members who used to envy her now asked quiet questions. Then came the confirmation. I ran into Eric at a business networking event. We had never really spoken one-on-one before, but this time he approached me. After some small talk, he casually mentioned that he had to cut Claire off financially. No more unlimited shopping sprees, no more extravagant vacations, no more throwing money at luxury just because she could. She had burned through an absurd amount of money, recklessly, carelessly, without a second thought. He finally put a stop to it. My parents refused to acknowledge what was happening. Every time someone brought up Claire, they insisted she was fine, that marriages go through ups and downs, and that Claire and Eric are just figuring things out. But their concern was obvious. The nervous glances, the way they changed the subject when her name came up. They were worried. Claire, on the other hand, refused to let her image crack. She still wore designer outfits, still talked about expensive plans, but the details weren't adding up. The trips never happened. The new purchases weren't really new. Her stories became more exaggerated, as if saying it out loud would make it real. Meanwhile, my investments were growing. With my rental property making steady income, I expanded my freelancing, made smarter financial moves, and started planning for something I never thought possible: early retirement. Claire must have noticed. Out of nowhere, she started being nice to me. Not just regular nice, overly nice, complimenting my hard work, asking vague questions about my money strategies. At first, I assumed it was part of her usual mind games. Then she got specific. She started bringing up how family helps each other and how sometimes people just need a little support to get back on track. I let her talk. Then, after one particularly forced conversation, she finally got to the point. She needed money. She phrased it carefully, not as a loan but as help. Something small, just to tide her over, just until things settled down. I told her no. She didn't take it well. First, she laughed like I was joking. Then when she realized I wasn't, her whole demeanor shifted. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, said something about family loyalty. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just told her the truth. Financial responsibility is a choice. A week later, rumors started circulating. Claire and Eric were separating. At first, it was hard to believe. For years, Claire had built her entire personality around her perfect marriage, but the signs had been there all along. Eric had been pulling away. He stopped playing along with her games. He stopped indulging her. He stopped being part of the show. And now he was done. One night, Claire showed up at my door. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, and for the first time in years, she wasn't wearing expensive designer clothes. She said she was losing everything. She talked about how hard things had been, how she needed support, how I couldn't possibly understand what she was going through. Claire had been trying to act composed, but her messages became frantic. I don't know how to get out of this, she admitted one night. I don't have a plan. She tried to play it cool at first, but the cracks were widening. And then, when she finally showed up at my door, it wasn't just anger in her eyes, it was pure panic. But I wasn't going to fix her mess. I told her the same thing I had before. She had spent years treating money like an unlimited resource. Now she was dealing with the consequences. She left angry. The next morning, I found out she had started telling people that I was selfish, that I had turned my back on family, that I didn't care what happened to her. My parents took her side immediately. They called, texted, tried to guilt trip me. They said I was cruel, that money isn't everything, that Claire just needed a little help to get back on her feet. I ignored every single message. That was the moment I walked away from the golden child narrative. I had spent years being compared to Claire, treated like I wasn't good enough because I didn't marry rich, didn't live in luxury, didn't play the role they expected me to play. But now, Claire was the one struggling. And I was free. Claire finally hit the point she never thought possible, rock bottom. The divorce was official. Eric was done, and without him, everything collapsed. Claire's downfall wasn't immediate, but the signs were there. First, it was little things, subtle cutbacks, avoiding certain events. Then, her Instagram posts became more about cherishing simple things rather than flaunting luxury. When she lost the house, she played it off as downsizing, but eventually she couldn't fake it anymore. The apartment was gone, the car repossessed, and there was no backup plan. The expensive car repossessed, the credit cards canceled. She had no savings, no assets, nothing to fall back on. Instead of taking responsibility, she played the victim. My parents, of course, welcomed her back with open arms. Instead of telling her to get a job, they coddled her. They let her move back into her old bedroom, acting like this was some temporary setback instead of the natural consequence of her choices. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. I upgraded my apartment, not anything extravagant, just something better suited to my growing financial success. I continued investing, and for the first time, I started mentoring others on financial literacy, helping people avoid the exact mistakes Claire had made. That's when Claire suddenly changed. She started acting humble, pretending to be grateful for a fresh start. She talked about learning from her mistakes, about rebuilding her life from the ground up. At first, it seemed like maybe she had finally grown up. But the act didn't last long. She started hinting at needing a little help. At first, it was small things, comments about how difficult it was adjusting to a normal life again, how she just needed some time. Then it escalated. She brought up the idea of staying with me for a while, just until she got back on her feet. Then she casually mentioned needing a small loan to help her start fresh. I shut it down immediately. I told her point blank that she needed to get a job, that plenty of people work their way back up from worse situations, that she wasn't entitled to anyone's money. She didn't argue. Instead, she started playing a different game, pretending she was trying. She talked about how she was applying for jobs, how she was really making an effort, except no interviews ever happened. No follow-ups, no actual work. My parents ate it up. They kept pressuring me, calling me cold, saying family helps family. They insisted Claire just needed one break, that I should give her a chance. I didn't budge. Then, the final betrayal. Claire had started dropping hints. You must be doing really well with all those investments, she said one day, eyeing my laptop screen. Another time, she laughed nervously and joked, if only I had your credit score. I thought nothing of it, until a month later, when my bank called about a suspicious loan application in my name. Claire had stolen my identity. She had used my personal information to take out a loan, assuming I wouldn't notice. I immediately confronted her. At first, she denied everything. Then, when she realized I had proof, she tried to justify it, talking about how desperate she was, how I had so much and she had nothing. I didn't waste time arguing. I filed the fraud report. Claire was officially forced to deal with the legal consequences. My parents were furious, but not at her. They called me heartless. They screamed about how I had ruined her life over a mistake. They acted like I was the villain for protecting myself. That was it for me. I cut them all off. No more messages. No more visits. No more being the family scapegoat. Claire had spent years looking down on me. Now she was the one struggling. And for the first time in my life, I was free. Claire avoided jail time, but the damage was done. She was forced into a repayment plan. Her credit was destroyed, and she couldn't take out a loan for anything. No luxury apartments, no designer splurges, not even a basic car lease. She went from flaunting unlimited wealth to scraping by, and for someone who had spent her whole life looking down on normal people, it was a harsh reality check. But instead of taking responsibility, she did what she always did, blamed everyone else. First, it was Eric's fault for cutting her off. Then it was my fault for refusing to help family. Then, when that story didn't get her the sympathy she wanted, she turned on our parents, accusing them of failing her when she needed them most. Meanwhile, my parents were busy with their own damage control. They tried to spin the narrative to make me look like the villain, the heartless sibling who turned his back on family, the one who punished Claire instead of showing compassion. But it didn't work. Extended family and mutual friends weren't blind. They had seen Claire's behavior for years. They saw how she had treated me, how she had burned through Eric's money, how she had never lifted a finger to help herself. The more my parents tried to make me the bad guy, the more people sided with me. And without their toxicity dragging me down, my life only got better. I focused entirely on my goals, expanding my investments and growing my portfolio. I worked harder, smarter. And then it happened, the milestone I never expected to hit so soon. A major investment deal came through, and with it, I officially hit millionaire status. It wasn't about the number itself. It was about everything it represented. Every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I had spent grinding, while Claire laughed at me, it had all paid off. While I was leveling up, Claire and my parents were sinking. My parents had spent so much of their own savings helping Claire that now they were struggling. Suddenly, they weren't just defending Claire, they were hinting at needing money themselves. They didn't ask directly. At first, it was subtle. Comments about how retirement is expensive, about how they had sacrificed so much for their children. Then, it got more obvious. I ignored every attempt. Then, one day, my mother finally broke down and admitted it. They needed help. I didn't hesitate. I looked at them and said, "You picked your golden child. Now she can take care of you." They had nothing to say after that. Claire made one last attempt to claw her way back into my life. She reached out, claiming she had changed, that she just wanted to make things right, that she finally understood everything now and hoped we could move forward as a family. I ignored the message. Then, a week later, I found out the truth. She was still bad-mouthing me, still playing the victim, still trying to get sympathy from whoever would listen. And at the same time, she was dropping hints about how she just needed one break, how she wouldn't say no to a little help. That was the last straw. I blocked her. No more second chances. No more manipulation. No more family loyalty to people who never had mine in the first place. Without them, my life was quieter, lighter, better. Then came the moment that tied everything together. I was invited to speak at a major financial seminar, an event attended by some of the top professionals in the industry. As I stepped onto the stage, I glanced at the audience. Eric was there. After the seminar, he approached me. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just respect. He congratulated me. Then, after a pause, he smirked. "You dodged a bullet." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Claire had spent years trying to prove she was better than me, but in the end, she was the one left with nothing. And I was free, thriving. And finally, completely done with them. Claire officially hit her lowest point. No money, no credit, no job, no rich husband to bail her out. With nowhere else to go, she was completely dependent on our parents, living rent-free in their house. They paid for everything, her food, her bills, even her personal expenses. And despite everything, they still coddled her like she was going through a rough patch instead of dealing with the consequences of her own choices. But it wasn't just Claire who was struggling. Supporting her was draining my parents financially. At first, they wouldn't admit it, but the signs were there. Little complaints about rising expenses, subtle comments about how families should stick together. It was only a matter of time before they started hinting at something. Meanwhile, Claire wasn't job hunting. She claimed she was looking for work, but all she ever did was bounce from one get-rich-quick scheme to another. First, it was an MLM, something about overpriced skincare products. She spammed old friends and acquaintances, pitching it as a business opportunity, acting like she was about to make 6 figures from home. That failed. Then, it was some investment scheme she found online, promising passive income with minimal effort. She sank what little money she had left into it. That failed, too. Next, she resorted to online sob stories. She posted vague, emotional messages on social media about how tough life had been, about how she was rebuilding after being betrayed. She carefully left out the details. At first, some people fell for it, sending sympathy messages, offering support. But as time passed, even they started catching on. Her online glamorous life didn't match reality. She continued posting old photos, recycled luxury vacation pictures, high-end restaurant shots, desperately trying to keep up the illusion. But people weren't stupid. They noticed. Mutual friends started calling her out, asking why she was constantly reminiscing about the past instead of sharing anything new. Her reputation crumbled. Friends who used to admire her lifestyle distanced themselves. People who once envied her stopped returning her calls. She wasn't a socialite anymore. She was just someone who only reached out when she needed something. Then came the setup. My parents invited me over for dinner. At first, it seemed normal, small talk, casual conversation. Then halfway through, the real reason became obvious. They wanted money. They weren't direct about it at first, just comments about how families should support each other, about how Claire just needed a little help getting back on her feet. Then, finally, they asked. I shut it down immediately. They made their choices. They spent years treating Claire like the successful one, ignoring everything I built on my own. Now they wanted me to fix her mistakes? Absolutely not. Claire tried a different approach. She pulled every manipulation tactic she had, apologizing, crying, saying she had changed. She regretted everything, she just needed a chance. Then, not even a week later, I found out the truth. She was still talking badly about me. She was telling mutual friends that I was selfish, that I abandoned my own family, that money had changed me. It was the final confirmation I needed. I cut them all off. Claire, my parents, the entire cycle of guilt, manipulation, and toxicity. Without them, I focused completely on my own life, traveling, expanding my business, building real relationships with people who actually supported me. Then, one day, a mutual acquaintance reached out. Claire was dating someone new, wealthy, well-established. And just like that, she was back in her old routine, bragging, acting like she was bouncing back, telling people she never really lost anything in the first place. It was history repeating itself. And this time I had absolutely no interest in watching it unfold. Claire made her grand comeback, or at least, that's what she wanted everyone to believe. She had a new man, and according to her, he was wealthier than Eric ever was. She wasted no time flaunting their perfect relationship, posting pictures of expensive dinners, luxury vacations, and designer gifts. Our parents, of course, ate it up. They immediately flipped back into smug mode, acting like Claire had proven everyone wrong, like her downfall had been just a temporary setback. The shade was subtle but clear. It's good to see Claire back where she belongs, as if her entire identity depended on being pampered by a rich man. I didn't argue. I just smiled, because I already knew how this would end. Something was off about the guy. Unlike Eric, who had real wealth and kept a low profile, this new guy threw money around like he had something to prove. Flashy cars, extravagant gifts, over-the-top gestures, everything about him screamed performative wealth. A few months in, Claire announced her engagement. She framed it like the ultimate comeback story, like she had risen from the ashes and secured her place back at the top. Our parents doubled down, smugger than ever. They made little comments about how some people spend too much time working instead of just enjoying life, as if I was the real fool for building something on my own. I still didn't say anything, because then, the truth came out. Something about Claire's new fiancé felt off from the start. He loved grand gestures, expensive weekend getaways, over-the-top gifts, but I noticed she never mentioned his business, or how he actually made his money. A mutual friend confirmed my suspicions. He's deep in debt, they whispered. Keeps hopping from one investment to another. It's all smoke and mirrors, but Claire, desperate to reclaim her status, either didn't see it, or didn't want to. Apparently, he had a habit of dating women who looked expensive so he could keep up the illusion of wealth. His entire lifestyle was built on loans, credit cards, and borrowed money. Claire, thinking she had secured another golden ticket, had no idea, until everything collapsed. The guy's financial situation got exposed, sudden canceled trips, maxed out cards, whispers about unpaid bills. Claire, who had bet everything on this new engagement, was right back where she started. No money, no security, no backup plan. This time, even our parents struggled to spin it. It was public, undeniable, humiliating. She tried to save face, but people weren't buying it. Former friends who had once admired her started avoiding her. No one wanted to be dragged into her never-ending financial disasters. Then, in a move that truly shocked me, Claire reached out one last time. She said she finally understood, that she had learned her lesson, that she just needed help getting back on her feet. She even tried to play the "we're family" card, acting like we could start over fresh. I let her finish. Then I told her the truth. Your problem is that you always expect someone else to save you. Fix it yourself. I blocked her. This time it was permanent. No second chances, no fake apologies, no more toxic cycles. And for the first time, our parents felt the consequences of their choices. Without Claire's rich husband to fall back on, they were forced to accept reality. The golden child they had spent years worshipping had nothing. And the daughter they had dismissed? I was now wealthier than Claire had ever been. On my own terms. Claire, once the family's prized success story, was just a cautionary tale. No luxury lifestyle, no admiration. Just another person who wasted every opportunity she had. And I was free. Finally, completely free.